Okay, modelers, so today we're going to be starting on our T34. Now this is a 72nd scale one. Tiny little things that they are. I'm not sure how many that you've built, but just because they're small doesn't mean they're not detailed. And this one here has actually got the bed frames or bed springs done in photo etch all around the turret and all around the hull. Now that's all photo etch work. It's going to be folded and so on. So it'd be a good video to be able to show you how to work with a bit of fine photo etch. There's a few other photo etch parts on it as well, you know, like grills and things like that. So as I go through doing those parts, I'll be able to sort of show you how we work with those. The only thing about this kit that I'm a little bit unsure of is the vinyl tracks. Now, because they're vinyl tracks, they stretch and they'll run straight along the tops of the wheels here. You won't get any sag or anything like that. Hopefully I'll be able to show you how to get a little bit of sag in them. I'm hoping it's going to work on this kit, but they're fairly fine, the tracks. So the tip I want to show you how to get saggy tracks with vinyl tracks, I'm hoping is going to work on this, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. If it doesn't work on this kit, I know it definitely works on others, but it's worth a try. So I'm going to build it pretty much as what you see on the box here, on the lid, with the white stripe around the top. Now the white stripe around the top was pretty much put on there with a paintbrush, so it's not something you have to do, like, you know, mask it off and spray it on and all that sort of thing. It's just if you can hand paint it around, even with a couple of runs in it. I've seen them, they have a couple of runs in it and stuff like that. And again, it's artistic license, guys. I mean, I'm not a rivet counter when it comes to making models. I do it sheerly because I love doing it, and hopefully you guys are the same. You just really enjoy doing what you do. Now, I'm not saying that rivet counters are, you know, shouldn't be part of the hobby. If that's what gives you enjoyment, you know, like having a detail to exactly the real thing, that's fine. It's just not my cup of tea. It's just not what I do. I know rivet counters a derogatory term, I know, but that's just, we know the talk in the hobby. That's just how people react to it. But anyway, guys, I'll get on with this build. I won't open the box at the moment because I've already done a review on this. That's in another video if you want to watch that. And I don't really need to open the box and show you, you know, what's in there at the moment, because you can go and look at that review. But anyway, guys, I'll get started on this. I'll turn the camera on anytime I need to show you something, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit out of this build. Okay, modelers, just a quick tip here when you're putting on small parts. Well, it doesn't really matter if they're small or whatever on smaller projects or larger projects. This is probably just a good habit to get into. I've got to put a hatch into this hole here. Okay, I've got the hatch cut out here. Now what I normally do is I dry fit it first and just make sure that that hatch is going to sit in there nicely. Now forgive me if this all looks a little bit skew-if, because I am doing this on an awkward angle like normal because of the camera. Okay, but that looks pretty good to me there where it is. Now rather than putting glue like straight down on this side here, you run the risk of, like, while you're handling the tank, if there's a bit of glue on the outside, you'll stick fingerprints in it, or you'll drag them around, or you'll melt the edges or whatever. So what I normally do, I put my finger on there, I hold that hatch in with my finger, and I tip it over to the other side. Hopefully you can see this, hopefully there's enough light for this camera, and I just put the glue just a little bit on there, hold it for a second, then let it go. Now you've got to be careful you don't put too much glue on. When you use this process, don't put too much glue on, because the glue will run through onto your finger, and then you definitely will leave a finger mark on there. So just the smallest little bit of glue to get it to start hanging on there. I'll get this to focus again for you. Okay, now once that seems to be fairly well dry, I'm just going to put a bit more glue around it, like so. Okay, go the other side. Now I check before I put my finger on it to make sure there's no glue running out there, and just give it a little bit of a push, and that will glue that hatch in place without having any sort of melted glue or bits of glue hanging around there to sort of ruin the finish. Okay guys, so that was just a quick tip to show you. Now like I say, it's not just for small parts, it's for any part you can glue from the inside. Try and glue it from the inside. Just saves you that hassle. If there is a bit of wet glue or whatever, you can make a bit of a mess. So that's just a quick tip, guys. Okay, we're at a point now where we're starting to put the finer details on things like grab handles and the lights and things like that. Now you have to make a decision at this point. If you're going to do a lot of weathering, or you're going to do camouflage patterns where you have to do masking and stuff like that, it's probably best to leave these fine details off at this stage, because what will happen if you put them on now, as you go around to try and do masking or do some heavy weathering, you're going to knock those parts off, especially on 72nd scale. They're very, very fine. 35th scale, they're just as bad sometimes, like especially grab handles, things like that, can be very, very delicate. And if you've got a lot of photo etch parts, it's even worse. So you have to make the decision now how heavy you're going to weather this thing, whether you're going to put camouflage patterns where you have to do masking and stuff like that. Now in this particular case here, I'm not going to do a lot of heavy weathering. All I want to do is just some light weathering, and just to show people who are just starting in modelling and stuff like that how to do just some basic weathering techniques to make a tank look realistic without going into the heavy weathering and, you know, chips and this, that and the other and damage and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be like not light weathering, but just a little bit lighter than what I normally do. I like to really weather stuff up, but in this case here it's just going to be a bit of dusting and stuff like that. So I am going to put the finer details on now. But like I say, as you're building your tanks, guys, you have to make the decision for yourself what you want to do, whether you want to do heavy weathering and masking and all that sort of stuff. It's best to leave those details off. Now what I do is when we get to this stage and you find some fine details, like on these instructions, I'll just move them up a little bit here so you can see them. So we've got some handles here, some grab handles going in on the back here. Now normally if I can't put those on now, and I have to put them on after, just so I don't have to keep looking back through the instructions trying to find the bits that I've missed out on, I'll put like a small red dot. Now I know I've got this in other videos, but I'll just quickly put this one too, just in case people haven't seen my other videos. Now that red dot tells me when I go back through these instructions later on, after I've weathered the tank and that red dot tells me, okay, there's some details here that I've left off and I can put them on now. Okay, so I'll put that for that handle, and anything, any fine details, I'll put a red dot beside the number just to let me know that these details need to be added. Okay guys, I'll keep going on with the build and I'll turn the camera back on. So going on to some of our photo etch parts here now. I've already done one side of this piece and I'll just do the other side on the video camera just to show you how I do this. Now just forgive me if this goes a little bit funny because I'm actually doing this at a really, really strange angle, guys. So we've got like a roller, and on this end here, hopefully you can see that. I'll try and pick it up. What I'll do, I'll pick it up on my finger and I'll get it to focus up fairly close so you can see it. Hopefully it'll focus for us. Like so. Okay, now hopefully you can see there's just one side of that and it's got the little hinge that holds it to the piece. Okay, now I'll show you how I've got that on there. Now that when you're working with parts like this, it really pays to take your time, because in 72nd scale, when you can put fine details on your armour or on your aircraft or whatever, it just makes them look that much better if you can get all these nice little fine details on there. So I'm going to take my time to make sure I get these pieces on. Now the first part is cutting them off the sprue. Okay, so we have the pieces here. Okay, it's these guys here, and all I'm going to do is cut that off, put my finger over it so it doesn't spring away. Okay, and it is actually stuck to my finger, that part that I'm after. You can see that there. Alright, I'm going to put it down on the paper, scrape it off my finger. Alright, now a part this size, you can try and trim the excess off if you want, but it can probably do more damage than good, and at that size you're really probably not going to notice that little burr that's on the end of it. So what I normally do is I try and just lick the end of my toothpick here to pick that up, put it down on there. Okay, now hopefully you can see, if I can get this to focus again. Alright, maybe you can't see that, but what's going on here with this piece is that there's a little groove in there where we have to fold it. Okay, hopefully you can see that in there now. Okay, now to fold that, I could use this little photo etch tool that I've got it sitting on. It's a little bit hard to sort of line up where that line is because it's so tiny. It's really hard to line it up. So what I do is I use a pair of tweezers to hold onto it. So I'm going to pick it up. Okay, I'm going to try and grab it with these tweezers. Okay, so hopefully you can see this now. Forgive me, the camera just cut out. I'm surrounded of video cards. So I've just cleaned the card off. I'm going to try again. So hopefully you can see I've grabbed that piece inside these tweezers. Now I'm going to use a file. I have to try and keep this focused for you guys because it is a little bit difficult with the way I've got this set up, this camera. Okay, but all I'm going to do is actually I might try a different setting on this. Okay, hopefully this will work a little bit better. Now what I'm going to do is, if I can get this to focus, is try and bend. Now to bend these pieces up, all I do is just 90 degrees to the tweezers like so, and that part is now bent. Okay, so I can put it down on the table. Just get it to let go of the tweezers, like so. Okay, now to put it on is like I've showed you in other videos. All it is a dab of super glue on the part you're going to stick it to. Use the toothpick in some Bic glue, like a glue stick like this guy here. Okay, just stick your toothpick in that, and that'll make it easy to pick that part up. And a little bit of super glue, we're going to stick it, and just carefully just place that part into the bean. Now I'm not going to do that on camera because the angle I'm doing it at, and it's just such a delicate process. I don't want it to sort of, it's just not going to work on camera. It's just too close and too delicate for you to be able to see it on camera, I think. So, and plus, like I say, the awkward angle I'm at, it's probably going to mess it up if I try and do it the angle I'm at. So I'm going to say just use your toothpick, dip it in that glue stick, and put that on the end of your little glue stick, that little part. Okay, a little bit of super glue on the part you're going to stick it to, line it up and just press it to it, hold it for a second, and then pull the stick away and it'll be glued in place. Okay modelers, so this part of the video I'm going to be talking about working with vinyl or rubber tracks as they come to be known. Now we all know it as modelers, these are horrible bloody things to work with. We'd rather the individual tracks now because you can put the sag in them, you can get that just look more realistic around the road wheels and that. But vinyl tracks doesn't mean that it's going to ruin the whole model. You can actually get them to put sag and stuff. Now hopefully you can see that clear enough on the camera here. I'm trying a different focus technique on this camera, so hopefully that's going to focus enough for you. You can see there, now that's just a vinyl track, and I've got it to get a little bit of sag and stuff like that. You can see the gap in where the joint is, but I'm going to fill that up with weathering powders and try and make that disappear. Now a lot of times with armour you have plates up over the tops of these wheels and you won't see that anyway, so it's going to be hidden and you don't have to worry about the sag. But on a tank like this, a lot of the World War II stuff especially, you had tracks that sagged. Now the Russian tracks didn't sag a lot, there's probably a bit too much sag in this, but I wanted to be able to put this in here just so you guys get the idea of what you can achieve just with your vinyl tracks. Now the tricks to working with these particular tracks can actually be glued together end to end on here just with the Tamiya super thin glue, the extra thin stuff that I use. I'm just going to try and change the focus on this, guys, because it's not really working too well, so just give me a second. Okay, now a lot of the tracks, the rubber tracks and that, won't work with that glue. You'll have to use super glue or something like that, and that joint is always weak. Okay, so you'll join it up, put a bit of tension on it to go and put it on there, and it'll pull that joint apart. Now one of the tricks for doing that is putting a staple in there. Okay, now you can do that and get away with it because that joint, just so long as you know where it's going to be on the armour, you can hide that joint, or you can put the staple just on the inside of these centre teeth here. Put the staple on the inside and super glue the rest, and hopefully that'll hold it. If it doesn't, you have to put a staple on both sides and try and hide that joint somewhere where you're not going to see it, or weather it up. Because it's a track, you can put a bit of mud over it or something like that if you like. But that's just one tip I found for tracks that you just cannot seem to glue them together. You can get different rubber cements and things like that that got a little bit of give so they won't break, but the problem is they pull apart and leave a big gap there. But like I say, just try the different glues. Like this one here, I found the extra thin cement worked well on this. It actually melted the plastic. I pushed it together, held it there with a peg until it dried, and it's just as strong as the rest of the track. Well, probably not just as strong, but pretty strong to join that together. Or if I hadn't had failed at that, would have put a dab of super glue there and then whacked a staple in one side of it. Okay, so that's how to join them. Now to get the sag that I've got inside there, that's just a little trick I picked up on the internet quite a while ago now, and I've been using it for a while, and it does work really well. It's just a thin bit of copper wire, okay? And what I do, I glue it on the inside of those teeth, okay, just down on one side like so. Okay, now you don't have to have that on both sides, just one side should be enough to give you that sag and hold it. Once you bend that wire with the track, it'll actually sag and hold that sag. Now the thicker the wire, obviously the more sag it's going to hold. I've used a fairly delicate piece here so you won't see it. Now you don't go around the whole track with this, only put it on the top where you want the sag to be and on the inside. That way it'll be very hard to spot it on the finished model, to look up underneath there and see it. If you put it all the way around, you definitely will be able to see it down here along the bottom. So try and put it up around the top where you want the sag. Down the bottom's not so much a problem because you don't want that to sag. It'll probably be on flat ground. Now if you want it on rocky ground, obviously you're going to have to find a way of bending that up and getting the sag to hold there. I have used super glue in that case on the inside and made a little bit of a sag where there's a rock or something like that. So that's just a little trick there. Now there's different ways, people do this in different ways. You can put the track on first. I put that one on first just so you guys can see that in action, or you can actually put the wire in, paint the model and paint the tracks and then put them on after. Now the only problem with that is where the joint is, obviously it's going to knock the paint and stuff off, but because it's going to be somewhere you choose to put it where it's going to be fairly well hidden, it shouldn't matter too much, and you can also just whack a bit more dust over it to cover it up. So the option's yours guys, whichever way you find easy to do it. Paint it on there or paint it off and then put it on later. It's up to you. Now one of the things, if you put it on afterwards, it can be a little bit hard sometimes to line up those teeth on the tracks will actually not want to go inside to the grooves inside the road wheels. So you have to get like a fine file or something like a nail file, push in there and just make sure those little notches go inside the tracks properly, inside the running wheels properly. Okay guys, so hopefully that's helped you with working with vinyl tracks. I think I've covered everything there. If I think of anything else, I'll turn the video back on and I'll cover whatever I need to. Just one more quick thing, just check your tracks first, because depending on whether you had to cut them off a rubber piece and you have to trim up those little notches where you cut them off or whatever, sometimes you'll have little injector pin marks and things you've got to look for before you do it. Do them now before you do any work on it. Try and get rid of those now. Okay guys, hopefully that's it. Hopefully that's covered that topic fairly well for you, and you can see the result there. And I sort of don't want to show you me putting this together and doing that, because it's going to be really hard with this camera to get close up enough, and at the angle I've got to work at, it's going to be a bit hard. But that's all I've done is put that bit of wire on the inside there, and make sure it is to the inside. When you put it on, it'll be to the inside and the top, so you won't see it. And then I've just gone through, and what I've done to do it in a bit of a rhythm, where what I do, just to focus for you. Okay, so I'd start on the first one here. I'll put a bit of super glue on the top of the road wheel, and on that track I'll put a toothpick in there to hold that down. Then do the next one the same way, and then that sag, I just put a toothpick in there, push down a little bit, not too hard because you don't want to break anything. Push down a little bit and let the toothpick sit in there for about 10 minutes or so, and that'll leave that sag in there for you, and go along the whole lot and get the whole lot like that. So that's all I do, guys, to do that, to put those on there. There's not any great tricks or anything like that. It's just a fairly standard sort of procedure. So the point we're up to now, I've got the tank is painted, and what I've done is just put an undercoat, like just a simple grey Tamiya paint, like just one of the ones I've got plenty of. I can't remember, dark sea grey or light sea grey or something like that, as an undercoat, just to look for any imperfections in the model. Then I went over it with a green. Now it's a fairly dark green that I put on there. Now the Russian green is a hard one to sort of pick because it served in so many environments, and it served in, you know, like some of them would just live their life in the sun, some lived in the mud. It's sort of hard to get that green depending on, you know, where the tank served. So this one here went fairly dark, and I'm going to lighten it down with the weathering stage, so it's going to end up being roughly where I want it to be. So it's something you've got to keep in the back of your mind when you use the green on the Russian tanks. The other thing I've done is just put the white stripe around the turret. Now I was going to do that by brush, and I started doing it by brush, but it just looked way too untidy in the scale. Now in 35th scale I definitely would have done it by the brush, would look much better, because a lot of those stripes were put on by brush. But this one here, just because it was 72nd scale, it just looked way too messy. So I'd actually put a bit of tape around there, and I just oversprayed it, you know, with the tape on there, masking it off. So the next step is now I'm going to put a coat of Future or Johnson clear over the top of this, just to protect that base coat. And once that's settled down, I'll put the decals on, and then once they've dried, I'm going to start on the weathering process. So it's just keeping this one very simple. I'm not going to do anything too severe with this, or too erratic with weathering processes and painting and stuff like that. I mean, 35th scale, I started getting into fading and things like that, but I'm not going to worry about with this one. 72nd scale is a little bit different, because you can overdo those effects very easily. And you'll see, because we've put as much detail on that tank as we can, it's going to look spectacular when it's done. Now with the bed springs, I'm not sure whether I'm going to put the bed springs on there or not, because to me they just don't look right. They look way out of scale. They just don't look like real bed springs to me. I may put them on just to dress it up a little bit and make it look a little bit different, but to me they don't look really like bed springs to me at all. I mean, they're just square mesh patterns in the middle, and yeah, I sort of held one up to the turret there before. Just doesn't look right to me. But anyway, guys, I'll get on to putting the clear on, putting the decals on, and then we'll come back and we'll start doing the weathering. Okay, modelers, so I'm up to the point where I've got one side of the tank weathered up. Now all I was after with this particular piece of armour is to have it fairly dusty looking. I didn't want mud and just big heaps of dirt and grime and stuff like that. So hence the fairly subdued sort of dusty look to it. Now I've only done this with weathering powders. I haven't used any other techniques, it's only weathering powders. Now to get this effect, all I've done is I sprayed it with a satin finish to help the weathering powder stick to it a little bit better. And I just brushed up and down with 3 different colours of weathering powder, just up and down on this side here, and on the front. You can see one side's been done, one hasn't. Again, up and down with the weathering powders to get that sort of, you know, like that effect, the streaking effect. And on the back here you can see again, one side's been done, one hasn't. Or hopefully you can see that. I can get the camera to focus for you. Okay. So, like I say, it's only done with weathering powders. I'll show you the side that hasn't been done. As you can see, that's still fairly bright. Now all I've done on this side here is I've sprayed some Tamiya buff and another colour that's close to buff. 2 different colours, watered right down, and just randomly just sprayed them in a very random pattern to give it that dusted on effect. Now I put more on the back. You can see on here, I've put more on here than I have on the sides and that. And on this side here I've put the weathering powder on, so you can see that's very light. But across the back here you can see I'll put a fair bit of that dusting effect on there and put the weathering over it. Now normally what I would do, I would put that spray effect over the top of the weathering, But in this particular case here, the reason I went the other way is because I wanted to show you guys the difference when you put the dust on there. Now the reason I normally put it on after is I do it so light. The weathering powders do most of the job, and I do that dusting with the paint so light you can barely even notice it. But this one here, because I wanted it so dusty, I'll put that down first and then put the weathering powders over the top. Now one of the things when you're using weathering powders is to make sure you get it down on top of the guards and on top of the tank. Now the idea is to try and get this so that it builds up in layers up to the top. The top's got to be cleaner than the bottom sort of thing. So I put lots of different colours of weathering powders down inside here on top of the guards, because that's where a lot of the dust would settle down on top of there. The other thing I've done, if you can notice on the fuel tanks here, I put some oil stains. Now all I've done there is use some Future or some Johnson mixed with some black Tamiya paint and just put like a little brush on there, and it's got to be very, very fine. Now the reason I do that is because what it does, it leaves that with a shiny effect, because it's got to look fairly wet, because they spilled diesel over the side there and dust is stuck to it and so on. So that's why I've done it in that way. Now on the front here you can see I haven't done this track here yet, but what I'm going to do that is just put on some rust colours. Now on the sides, on the wheels here, all I've done is pretty much the same as with the rest of the tank. I put lots of different coloured weathering powders, well probably three. I've got three on the side here. I just brush them like just, you know, fairly thick brush. I'll just quickly show you while I've got the camera on here. Okay, get this to focus for you, hopefully. Okay, so I'm just going to put on a few different colours just on the one wheel. Okay, there's three different colours there mixed in. Alright, and then all I do is I put down some, well, what I use is shellite, which is sort of like a white spirit. I just dab that on there and let it settle and then let it dry. And then I dry brush that, like just with a nice stiff brush, and brush it back, and it gives you that nice sort of look. And now I put that down, right down inside here as far as I can get, all up on top of the tracks here and so on. Now I use that same effect on the tracks as well. So when you see this finished, it's that same technique that I've used. I've just put lots of weathering powders inside the tracks. Okay. Then I'll put some white spirit on there and let that dry, and then I'll dry brush, and that'll just bring up those tracks really nice. Okay, now I know this camera's not focusing very well there at the moment, guys. I'm going to have to change the focus settings on this. It's not focusing the way I want, but anyway, you get the general idea. Now, as far as the grab handles go, you've probably seen one that's fallen off over here. It doesn't matter, because I'm going to try and put the bed springs on over the top of this when it's finished. Now the bed springs are going to look a little bit funny, because like I say, they don't look natural to me. But I will put them on. They're going to be a little bit dented up. I'll just put one in here and in the picture for you. Okay, this one here is supposed to go up over the top somewhere. Okay. Now, as you can see, it looks a little bit out of scale. That doesn't look like a bed spring to me at all. This looks like some steel mesh. Now, when I paint that, it's not going to make any difference. I'm going to paint it in the rust colours and stuff like that. But I will put it on there just to give it a bit more detail and so on. But I'm going to do it on one side first. If I don't like the look of it, I'm going to take it off. And I'll put all the grab handles. You can probably see over here. I've got a little grab handle down here that has fallen off the tank. It doesn't matter, because I had those stuck on there, a little bit of blue tack, because when I put these bits of mesh on, they're in the road, so I had them stuck on blue tack, so I'll take them off in case I wanted to use the mesh. But okay guys, I'll get on with weathering this side of the tank, and like I say, the techniques I used are exactly the same as what I used on that other side there. And when I'm ready, if I think I want to put the rusted mesh on there, I'll show you how I do that. But if not, I'll just take some still photos of the tank finished without the mesh on it. Okay, modelers, so we're finished off now. I did put a few of the bed springs on there, but I don't really like the effect. I mean, like I say, they just don't look realistic. I bent them up and twisted them around. I put a bit of shiny edges on it where the crew would have crawled over them and stuff like that. And I painted them in a rust colour, because obviously being bed springs, they're not meant to be out in the weather, and if they were out in the weather, they probably would have rusted. So I've rusted them up fairly well. and I mean it doesn't look too bad, but they still don't look like Bedsprings to me. That's just I don't know. They could have been done better as far as I'm concerned. They just look like mesh to me. And I'll put this up a little bit closer so you can get an idea what I'm talking about. You see that it doesn't look like Bedsprings at all there. Like I say, I've rusted them up fairly well. I've broken off some of the spikes that would have been welded to the tank with, so that they collapsed on top of the tank there. On the other side here, I've left them fairly well where they would have been. So I've put damage on one side, not on the other. And hopefully you can see what I've tried to achieve here. But what I'll do, guys, I'll take a few still photos, and hopefully that'll give you a much better idea of the finished product and what it looks like. I mean, to me it looks pretty good, but like I say, I'm very, very disappointed in the Bedsprings. They could have been done much better as far as I'm concerned as photo etch parts. I mean, photo etch can only do so much, I guess, but like I say, they just don't look like Bedsprings to me. They just look like mesh plates that they've put on there, sort of thing. I've put on a little bit more of the oil stains on the fuel tanks there. That's something that they would have used quite a bit as refueling their tanks and so on. Put quite a bit of dust around the tracks. I've put a little bit of shine on, hopefully I'll get this to focus on you, on the front of the tracks there, where the tracks would have been worn over the top of the tarmac and things like that. Anyway, guys, what I'll do, I'll take a few still shots, and hopefully I'll give you a better idea of the finish I've got on this thing. I'm not too disappointed in it, but I think if the Bedsprings had been much better, it could have been a really, really beautiful little product. But yeah, the Bedsprings sort of let it down a little bit. But still, like I say, I'm not too disappointed in it. It's quite a nice little piece of armour for 72nd scale. It looks quite good. Anyway, guys, leave in the comments below anything you think I could have done better. You know, if you like the video, thumbs it up, and share them around, sort of thing. But you know, like if there's anything you think I could have done better on this, or there's other products around you think I could have used the Bedsprings that might turn out a little bit better, sort of thing, let me know in the comments below, guys. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed this build. Like I say, even though I'm a little bit disappointed in it, I really enjoyed the build because it's something different. Doing 72nd scale, because it's so tiny and it's so fiddly and so on, it's like doing, you know, like a big project and using lots of photo etch on it. There's lots of little fine details you have to keep mucking around with. I've broken off some of the handles, and I've done that deliberately on the back here, on the back plate. A lot of those grab handles would have been broken off during the war, you know, like with people jumping down them and so on, and the amount of abuse these tanks got inside urban environments, especially. I know the Russians used to back their tanks inside buildings and you know, try and get them covered up, sort of thing. They'd break a lot of stuff off. So, to be honest, if this had been more realistic, I would have dented up all the fuel tanks and, you know, done a lot more damage to it. But anyway, guys, that's just an artistic license thing, depending on how you want to finish it off. But I just wanted to sort of show this and show, you know, some of the techniques and show how you can sort of finish things off. Someone left a comment about finishing off Russian tanks. Like, I think what they were trying to get at is that, you know, like finishing off something that's just all green. Hopefully this has given you a few answers. Even though this is 72nd scale, you can achieve the same look in 35th scale. You know, just with weathering powders. You don't have to, you know, like do all the streaking effects and stuff like that. Just weathering powders can, you know, leave you with the same really nice effect. But anyway, guys, I'll end the video there. Thanks very much for watching, and give me a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like it, and leave me a few comments. Thanks, guys.